Our presenters today are Eddie McBride, President and CEO of the Lubbock Chamber of Commerce, and Norma Ritz Johnson, Executive Vice President of the Lubbock Chamber of Commerce and a fellow alumna. Take it away, you guys.
Tracy, thank you very much. And on behalf of the Lubbock Chamber and Norma, thank y'all very much for the opportunity to address y'all today. It's an actual treat to get a chance to talk to y'all, and I want to first congratulate all of you young alumni from Kasner on collecting together and working together. I feel very comfortable addressing y'all today, and I think you're gonna see throughout the history that we're going to give you about chambers, but the Lubbock Chamber in particular, that we're pretty familiar with Kasner. At one point in time, around 2005, the Chamber and I had actually on staff 3 Kasner graduates, as well as 2 interns. So I think all in all, over the years, we've had a high majority of our interns on the Chamber staff actually come from Kasner. Norm and I counted this morning that around 20 to 21 actual interns over the 20 years that I've been here at the Chamber, 21 years I've been at the Chamber. So obviously we're very familiar with many of you and probably some of your classmates. But the purpose of today's presentation, this webinar, is to make y'all understand about the Chamber of Commerce is a professional organization. And I got to give you a little bit of background and death by PowerPoint to make sure y'all understand what is out there as far as what a Chamber of Commerce is. The first Chamber of Commerce recorded activities actually were created in ancient Israel. And as you can imagine, Israel being on the coast of the Eastern Mediterranean, they would actually have much shipping come in from obviously throughout the Mediterranean. And they would meet in facilities where merchants from Asia would actually come in these buildings, they actually were divided into chambers. And so that's where the term Chambers of Commerce were first originated from, as far as historically what they can find from all the research. So what the Chamber of Commerce actually does is obviously based around commerce. But essentially what it is, it's a voluntary collection of people, just like your organization with the young Kasner graduates, is the fact that they meet together to do a variety of things. And as the Chambers of Commerce that are run by volunteers, all of them, as far as I know, especially the ones in the United States, Chambers of Commerce are international. And got an email yesterday from the American Chamber of Commerce in China wanting us to help them spread the word about some of the things going on in their business relations with the Chinese. Don't know if I'm too happy about spreading anything about the Chinese businesses at this point in time, but at least I wanted you to know it is an international effort. Historically, the chambers have been deeply involved in our communities, and you can see what we have there bolded is some of the things that from a staff perspective and from the functions of the chamber, what we've been expected to try to do. Anywhere from economic development to human resources to public relations even. So we've had a variety of efforts over the years that the chambers are involved in. Chamber members are typically business organizations and individuals. Obviously, there's 7,000 chambers across America, 7,000 in various sizes, anywhere from the biggest of the cities to obviously the smallest of the rural communities. And in Texas, there's over 300. We have a huge amount of chambers in the state of Texas. And many of them in West Texas don't even have, obviously, paid staff. But typically what the chambers consist of are businesses, individuals, and organizations that band together to do things because it's easier to do things as a collective effort and have their voice heard more as a group than as opposed to individuals. So these various related businesses that they create the environment, obviously, to help generate commerce. The chambers, again, are run by its members, the volunteers. Most folks, it's hard to understand sometimes why a business would pay dues and or sponsor to provide donations to the chamber, but it's, again, based on that collective effort of being able to share voices. So the board of directors, and these are typically everything that we do at the Chamber of Commerce is the same for any other nonprofit. The board of directors is led by a chair. And this chairperson actually leads a board and sometimes an executive committee. And then the staff is handled by a professional manager, such as a CEO or a president or executive directors or executive managers at the smaller communities. And again, they're all run by volunteers. I have been to quite a few chambers in West Texas that I've met with their volunteer committee, and they're the ones who roll up their sleeves and actually do the work of the chamber. So it various sizes. Our particular chamber is medium size as far as we have a large membership, but in a medium sized city. But nonetheless, we'll address also more about our committees that we actually perform. But you can see there in the text that it talks about could be economic development, education, government relations, or tourism, or all of those other ones. I wanted specifically to show y'all this wording because I want to talk about the Lubbock Chamber specifically. Because one of the things that folks need to understand is that we don't take bipartisan stances on things. We take both what could be the Republican Party platform, we could take what the Democratic Party platform is when it involves business-related activities. We are the defenders of the capitalistic form of enterprise in America and free markets. So this is the purpose of our chamber, is that we preserve the competitive enterprise. That's what our job is to identify the importance for business and business problems and overcome those problems. The other thing specifically that our bylaws state is that we represent our business members and business in general at City Hall, at the Austin State Capitol, and Washington, D.C. We represent and advocate on their behalf because most of our business members are small business and can't get out of their businesses on a day-to-day basis to be able to represent themselves in those with our elected officials in those areas. So obviously we also do everything we can to overcome, and the detriments are the things that could be obstacles to the growth of business in our community, and we try to help overcome those. But one of the language that I really enjoy the most in our bylaws is that we appreciate the value of the liberal investment of substance on behalf of self and the interest of competitive business. And obviously those are very important for us to represent and defend business to grow and to expand in our communities. The Lubbock Chamber, we've been around since 1913. We actually had an earlier group, but we didn't get formed until that date to be incorporated. And one of the very first things that we did, I'm sure that y'all appreciate, is the fact that we created 16 millimeter film to send out to the entire southeastern part of the United States to attract cotton farmers to West Texas. So I think the Chamber did a very good job in our early years. For many years, the Chamber built the community in that respect. We had a volunteer committee member of business members that actually wrote the city charter that still exists today. We led as it says, the creation of the South Plains Fair. The original Chamber secretary was also the one, A.B. Davis, is the one who created the fair. He worked at the Chamber for 37 years and he was at the fair for over 40. So we helped bring the railroad to town, the airport, Reese Air Force Base, I-27. And one of the things that we're very proud of, there was a volunteer committee of business members that actually wrote the application and hand carried it to Austin to create Texas Technological College. And I think we're we've had a wonderful relationship, that town and gown relationship ever since. So as I mentioned, 78 years, we actually did the Economic Development and Visitors Bureau effort. It was taken away from us in the mid-90s, and we actually led the sales tax election in 2003 to create the existing Lubbock Economic Development Alliance that does economic development in Lubbock. We led the Giant Side of Texas campaign, a very successful 3-year campaign to talk about our self-image and how we improved our own self-image. And one of the best value-added programs that we've ever created at the Chamber was a healthcare plan for our small businesses. Very successful and very helpful. Tried to survive Obamacare, and we're still trying to recover from some of the Affordable Care Act things that happened to our business, our healthcare business. One of the things that we're proud of too, and we led the alcohol sales option petition efforts. As Norma would tell you, we were at one point in time, I'm sure as most of y'all remember, one of the largest dry counties outside Saudi Arabia. So we were very proud of the fact that we actually brought the alcohol election to a vote. We also did the Imagine Lubbock Together effort, which actually was a community-wide visioning and strategic planning effort. And have to brag on ourselves as we've been 3 times accredited by the U.S. Chamber at the 5-star highest level, one of only 128 chambers in America that's been at that 5-star level. and twice we've been recognized as the Chamber of the Year by the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives. Here's some of our logistical information. We're a nonprofit 501c6 defined by the IRS. I have a 34-person board of directors, 9-person executive committee that does a lot of the heavy lifting for the board, 12 people on our staff with almost $2 million budget. And again, right out of our bylaws, our mission is to strengthen, promote, and serve the business community. We also have a 501c3 charitable chamber foundation, charitable and education efforts that we do for both chamber programs as well as business community efforts as well. We have 1,687 members that pay us dues. They represent 79,000 employees and over $2 billion in regional household earnings. Our membership reflects about a quarter of all the businesses, about 25% of all the businesses that are in Lubbock. So we got a huge chunk, and we actually represent our businesses as the Lubbock is the largest trade federation on the South Plains of Texas. And we do that all without tax dollars. We do it all with private funds, the dues and sponsorships provided by our members. I'm an old Air Force guy, so I got to give you the chain of command. We start with the general membership, and this reflects how it actually operates through the board, through the executive committee. And then we're 5 divisions, as shown here on the slide. Business advocacy, which is one of our most important functions, community development, communications, our events, and then our member engagement functions. And I want to make sure that y'all understand from a nonprofit association, our board, this is really the board responsibilities. Essentially, their job is to do they do policy. They do the things that are identified here, financial oversight, strategic planning, and making sure we do what we're supposed to on a day-to-day basis. But I, as the staff director, we're the ones who actually do the actual, we roll up our sleeves and get things done at the staff level and use volunteers where we may, but we're the ones that actually pull off the day-to-day operations of the chamber. So I just wanted to make sure y'all knew what the roles of any board and any staff at any nonprofit agency. This is a very good depiction of exactly what that is. These are our program of work, our business plan. Norma will talk more about a few of these, but our oldest committee is our Ag and Natural Resources Committee. Again, that's the one that actually tried to do economic development on behalf of cotton farmers and the ag in West Texas. And we have a diversity and inclusion task force. We have young professionals, a leadership Lubbock program that's been underway since 1975. We have a young entrepreneur network. We were basing it off the 4-H Be the E entrepreneurial program. And then all of our events, the Business Expo, the Hub City Barbecue, our wine festival. As you can see, some of those are really reflecting and supporting what ag is in our community. We have a prayer lunch, one of the few chambers across America that publicly demonstrate the celebratory use of prayer in our communities. We have an upcoming TTU State of the System lunch. And then we have, of course, our Salute to Ag and our Harvest lunch. So pretty much reflects how much our ag that we support in our community. Now Norma will take over and talk to a little bit more of the personal aspects of the Chamber of Commerce and reflect her experiences and how they could relate to you as well. So thank you, Norma, for taking over.
Thanks, Eddie. I appreciate it. I wanted to kick off this section with a little bit of a fun slide. We don't have Q&A right now. I know everybody's muted, but I wanted to throw out for a second for consideration for you guys to think about what all of these things that you see on your screen have in common. Just think about it. See if you mentally get the guess right, and I'll let you know. All of these things that you see on your screen came about, they're very famous things, but they all came about because a Chamber of Commerce made it happen. So we start in the upper left-hand corner with Woodstock. That was actually, the permit for that event was actually taken out by the Chamber of Commerce in Woodstock, New York. And so that's something that you've heard about probably your whole lives, but a Chamber of Commerce made that happen. The same thing with the Golden Gate Bridge. It was a group of business people as a Chamber of Commerce that decided that it was time to have a bridge and made sure that they got behind funding for it. So that was something that a Chamber of Commerce made happen. And then the first transatlantic flight from the US to Europe was actually something that came about through a Chamber of Commerce. I don't know if anybody wonders why the famed Spirit of St. Louis was called the Spirit of St. Louis, because it didn't actually launch from St. Louis. It launched from New York. But the reason it was called the Spirit of St. Louis is because the St. Louis Chamber of Commerce and the business leaders in St. Louis got together and actually funded that trip and that airplane. Finally, Hollywood Walk of Fame. We've all heard of it. Some of you may have even visited it. And it is actually an initiative and a project of the Hollywood, California Chamber of Commerce. There's a saying, and I'm going to get it probably a little bit wrong, but anything that ever happened good in a community that you didn't actually realize who was behind it, it was probably the Chamber of Commerce that made it happen. So I wanted to share a little bit, because I am a fellow alum from here, and I wanted to share a little bit about how I became involved with the Lubbock Chamber of Commerce. So I say this a lot, and I know that Eddie gets tired of hearing it, but I was actually born one block from the Chamber in 1968. And then in 1985, I received an award from the Lubbock Chamber of Commerce for being the outstanding South Plains 4-H'er. And then in 1986, I went to college a mile from the Lubbock Chamber of Commerce and was actually married across the street from the Lubbock Chamber of Commerce in 1998. So it's kind of always been at the center of my world, whether I actually was very involved with it or knew much about it at all. But the bulk of my involvement with it was when I went to work for the National Sorghum Producers. While I was there, I was able to volunteer with the Government Relations Committee that Eddie mentioned earlier here at the Chamber. And I joined that committee because I wanted to ensure that even though National Sorghum Producers is a national organization, certainly whether it was our research priorities, our research funding priorities for federal research funding at the time, we did have some projects that were going to be federally funded research projects that were going to take place right here in Lubbock, or whether it was just general ag policy when it came to sorghum or renewable fuels. All of those positions were something that I wanted to be sure that the Lubbock business community was aware of. At the time, grain sorghum was one of those crops that was probably not as well known as cotton. But the cotton folks are also involved with the Lubbock Chamber, and I thought it was worthwhile to ensure so that when we went to Washington, D.C., not only the people from ag that were on the trip, but also business people that were on the Washington, D.C. trip or that were talking to lawmakers also understood what the ag and grain sorghum industry priorities were. And so I got involved with the committee and was able to propose that some of our priorities at the Sorghum Association be included in the Chamber's federal policy positions that the Chamber publishes every year and communicates to elected officials and their staff. So it was really great, and what I called winning back then and even today is when you can get a business person that discusses the importance of an industry when they're meeting with lawmakers that isn't necessarily involved in that industry, and vice versa. So that's how I became involved with it. Also, while I was at the Sorghum Association, I became involved with sponsoring and participating in the Lubbock Chamber Washington, D.C. fly-in, and it was really a great opportunity. And so, next slide, please, Eddie. So then in 2004, the opportunity came up. The Chamber had an opportunity for their Vice President of Legislative Affairs position, and I wanted to expand what I was doing in public policy, and so came over to do that at that particular time, and it's been a huge adventure ever since. I became Executive Vice President in 2014, still work in the government relations area, as well as overseeing communications and community development here. One of the things I wanted to talk about that we've done from an ag standpoint since I've been at the Chamber is we're a very strong chamber when it comes to supporting agriculture. Been able to get other chambers of commerce in the area to get behind farm bills since I've been here. Have really got the business community been able to inform the business community and get them behind various farm bill efforts. Some farm bills have been a much steeper climb than others, and so we always try to rally the business community behind something that's really important to the Lubbock economy. That's really what we do here, is we advocate on policies that are critical to the Lubbock area economy, whether that's agriculture or energy or small and medium-sized business. So the other thing that we did was just an example of what of how that takes form recently is we held, for the last Farm Bill, we held a news conference here and invited all of the commodity organizations to speak at it. By hosting that at the Chamber of Commerce, and you hold a news conference to talk about the importance of the Farm Bill, that's sort of one of the type of activities that we do when it comes to agriculture. Lubbock is the Lubbock Chamber, and I know that the Abilene Chamber, Lauren, is on the call as well. But Lubbock and Abilene, I know Abilene has a really successful farm and ranch show, but really there's not many chambers of commerce across the nation that are as heavily involved in agriculture and farm policy as, for instance, the Lubbock or Abilene Chamber. So one of the reasons we were excited about being able to take part in this webinar today was to encourage you and to show you how you can help change that, and what a Chamber of Commerce might mean for you, and what you might mean to a Chamber of Commerce wherever you are by becoming involved in that. Back when, back when we were really working hard and heavy on one of the farm bills that was particularly tough, I contacted a few other chambers in other states about the size of the Lubbock Chamber in areas where there is a great deal of agriculture. There were communities that were either the size of Lubbock or maybe a little bit larger, and not all of them were that eager to get involved with agriculture or with getting involved with advocating for the Farm Bill. I remember one of them said, "Oh, our state Farm Bureau and our state Livestock Association are the ones that take the lead on ag policy, so we don't get involved in that." And I thought, well, it's important to your economy, so as a Chamber of Commerce, certainly they ought to be involved with that. After that, whenever I was visiting with people that were involved with organizations where they had maybe directors or were dealing with agribusinesses in other parts of the country, I always advised them to try to really encourage some agribusiness people to get involved with those chambers of commerce and try to influence the amount of involvement advocating for good farm policy. That's what Eddie was talking about, is that it's the volunteers and the volunteer leadership of the chamber that really drives what the policy of the chamber is going to be. So if a chamber is going to be involved in agriculture and advocate for ag and farm policy that's friendly to agriculture, or regulatory policy that's good for agriculture, the way that that's going to happen, if they're not already doing that, is for you to get involved. Next slide, please. Other chambers of commerce, and Eddie talked a little bit about this, but we also talked quite a bit about what the Lubbock Chamber does, but there may be opportunities with other chambers of commerce that are involved in activities that we necessarily aren't directly involved in the Lubbock Chamber, including tourism. So you might be interested in or involved in, or you might even be an economic stakeholder in ag tourism or wildlife tourism. And so if you are near a Chamber of Commerce that is involved in tourism, you certainly want to be involved with them and let them know that you're one of those stakeholders. Perhaps they don't have an ag or wildlife tourism initiative or publicity or anything like that, and you could certainly help to influence that. There's also chambers of commerce in smaller communities that have Main Street programs. And then, as Eddie mentioned, there are chambers of commerce that have either privately or tax-funded economic development, which is basically business recruitment and retention. Finally, other chambers of commerce also have sort of taken it to the next level and are engaged in political candidate recruitment. They endorse candidates, or they have a candidate pack. That what they do is they look at political candidates and find the candidates that most closely reflect pro-business, pro-growth, pro-jobs, pro-industry positions, and then they get involved in candidate races. So let's go back to you and chambers of commerce. And wherever a chamber of commerce is, there's probably a chamber of commerce near you. The first thing you can do is to contact your local chamber of commerce. If you know your local chamber of commerce, join your local chamber of commerce. Encourage your employer to get involved with and join their local chamber of commerce. All of the work that you're hearing about that we do is made possible by our members with their voluntary dues or contributions to the chamber. It really is the business community pulling together to fight for the economic prosperity of their community. A lot of the chambers of commerce have young professionals programs. You can get involved in some of the committees, whether they're event committees or policy committees like we've been talking about. You can get involved in sponsoring an event to promote your business or your organization. And finally, I really wanted to stop at this bullet for a minute and urge you, whether in the immediate future or in the distant future, to consider the Chamber of Commerce as a potential career choice. Eddie and I were talking the other day about this, and very few people probably go to college and say, I think I want to be a Chamber of Commerce executive. You sort of actually maybe get familiar with it. You might do an internship at a Chamber of Commerce. And some of our interns actually are chamber executives at this point. But it is a very interesting, rewarding, and great career choice. No 2 days of the week will be the same for you. It's always something different. If you're interested in policy, for instance, you're not always going to be working on the same types of policies. So it's very varied, and you will get to walk with the giants of the business community and industry in your community. And you'll also get to learn about a whole lot of things, and then also probably extend a little bit of your agricultural knowledge and love for ag, and have a little bit of influence in that area. One of the keys to being successful, whether as a volunteer or whether as a staff or executive at a Chamber of Commerce, is networking skills and the ability to really grow a good network. I know that a lot of the folks on this call have 4-H and FFA backgrounds, and that's something certainly that 4-H and FFA teach very early. And so I know that whether you choose to be a volunteer or whether you choose to maybe pursue a career in chambers of commerce, I think that that's definitely something that if you have a good background and good networking, and I know that Kasner also works very hard on encouraging networking, I think you would certainly have a leg up in that area.
And if we can, let me add just a couple of other things too before we actually open it up to questions that Norm and I both have been involved in that we want y'all to know from an ag perspective, but also more so from a Chamber of Commerce perspective on how we can be effective in gaining support for issues. I think it was the 2005 Farm Bill when a lot of questions were raised both in the New York Times and Washington Post about the use of subsidies and everything for various commodities, but especially cotton. So we found the U.S. Chamber of Commerce at that point in time actually siding on behalf of what was written in the Post and the Times. And we were just thoroughly appalled at the fact that obviously they didn't understand. So we actually worked very hard to get the U.S. Chamber involved with the National Cotton Council so they could understand, because over the years, the U.S. Chamber, who started just like us, had lost their contact with them having 1 million members. They lost a lot of their direct various commodity businesses and farmers that were members. So that was something we were very proud of, that we were able to connect them and make sure they understood better on behalf of the questions, especially what the WTO was taking on. So very proud of that. In the last legislative session, I think one of the things that I'm extremely proud of is the effort that we led with 16 or 17, maybe up to 20 West Texas chambers. We actually led an effort to get everybody to sign on to support the vet school. and sent a letter to the governor and to the lieutenant governor and all the members of the state legislature to make sure they supported that. And we're very proud to do that on behalf of our chamber and the business community and West Texas chambers and the West Texas business community. But even more so, our Lubbock Chamber PAC actually gave money to the Amarillo Matters PAC, who is actually lobbying on behalf of the Tech Vet School throughout the legislative session in Austin. And that was kind of unusual for Lubbock to do something like give money to somebody in Amarillo, especially our chamber, how unusual it was to give them money. So it just showed the importance of obviously of what the end product was that we were working on more so than anything else, and our ability to coalesce and bring people to help at the table. So Tracy, I just wanted to make sure we got those in before we opened it up for questions and answers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation.